Hello, I'm Greg Harchis, Superintendent for the Appleton Area School District. Over the next several weeks, we are going to release a series of videos to help us provide information to our families and our community about our November 8th referendum. Each video will focus on a particular area of the referendum and last about 3 to 5 minutes. This first video is going to just provide some information, background information about our district. And so let me start with our motto, which is success for every student every day. And it comes out of our vision. So our vision is that working together, students, families, staff, and community will ensure that each graduate is academically, socially, and emotionally prepared for success in life. Every student, every day. And it's very critical for us that we are talking about success for our students at all times. And success can mean something different to our 15,000 plus students, but it is our challenge to make sure that we're helping students find that success over the course of their education in the Appleton Area School District. I want to show you the demographics of our district in this slide. And so it starts with our enrollment. Last year, we had an enrollment of 15,291 students. And when I look at the data, the demographics from our district, you can see that we're much larger than the other local districts. And I share this with you just because I want you to understand that 25 years ago, although we were still a larger district, the rest of our demographics look very similar to Freedom and Hortonville and Kimberly-Kaukauna and Little Chute and so on across the Fox Valley. But in Appleton, we've changed considerably. And so it starts with our students of color. We've become a much more diverse school district with 35% of our students being of color. We have 11% of our students that are English learners, and that means that English is not their first language. And so for a long time, we've been educating students who may have Hmong as their first language or Spanish, but more recently, it's been Swahili speakers who are refugees from the Congo. Last year, we had refugees come to us from Afghanistan, and so we have more challenges. And so when we talk about success might mean learning English for many of our students, along with reading and writing and so on. So many more challenges that come with the variety of languages. We have students that speak over 50 home languages in our district. The next column shows our free and reduced meal population. And so where you see 45%, 40 of that 45% of our students qualify for free meals. What that means is they come from a household, for example, of 4, and that household has an annual income of $37,000 or less. For a household of 4 to qualify for reduced, they would be under $51,000, but more than $37,000. So that's 40% of our students come from households that are earning $37,000 or less. And you can see Menasha is very similar to us in terms of those demographics. And finally, our students with disability population continue to increase. And why I share all of this information with you is it just means that the more challenges our students have, the more resources we need to help them become educated, to help them be adults that are going to contribute back in our community here in Appleton. This next slide shows districts that we spend a lot of time comparing ourselves to because they're much more like us in terms of demographics. So Madison, Racine, Green Bay, Kenosha, Janesville, Oshkosh, Sheboygan, Waukesha, and Eau Claire. They're similar to us in size. They have similar demographics than as we do. So we look at them often. We're looking, where are they successful? Perhaps we can replicate that in our district. We're looking to collaborate with them when possible. And this slide specifically shows you expenditures per student because I also want to explain that we are a low spending district in terms of our expenditures per student. And the reason for that is the state put in a revenue limit in 1993. And in 1993, we were a much different district in terms of the needs of our students. And as we've changed, we've not been able to get out from underneath that revenue limit. So if a student were in Madison, they would receive more funding from the state for that student than if that student lived in Appleton. So that's what this slide is showing you, just some of the challenges we have under the revenue limit that was imposed by the state and continues to be imposed by the state each year. This next slide shows you the age of our buildings. And so that's one of the main focuses of our referendum is to address our schools. Now, we've done a very good job of keeping our schools functional from a facility standpoint, but we have some challenges with how those schools function educationally. So let me start by just talking about our newest school. So Appleton North is our newest school, and you can see that it was built in 1995, so it's in its 27th school year. And then we have some of our, what we call our new elementary schools. And so our new elementary schools are Houdini and Ferber on the north side, and Horizon and Berry on the very south side. And so they were built in the late 80s and the early 90s. And we didn't build any schools all through the 1970s or through the early 80s. And we have to go back to the 60s where we built McKinley and East, and we built Johnston, we built Einstein, and then we didn't build the school, which is now Classical. We purchased that building, but you can see those buildings that were built in the 60s. And then this next slide shows really where our building boom occurred through the 50s, where we built 8 elementary schools and a middle school. And so many of our elementary schools in the central part of our city were all built in the 1950s. So they're nearing 70, or even some of them are right at 70 years old. So much older buildings than our 4 new elementary schools. And then we have our oldest buildings. So West was built in 1938. We have Wilson and Kaleidoscope. Kaleidoscope's the former Roosevelt School. They're built in 1925, so they're almost 100 years old. The Morgan building still functions as a school for our central students, and those are high school students that attend there. And we have some different alternative and special education programs that use the Morgan building. And then we have our oldest school, which is Columbus, built in 1894. So the average age of our schools is 66 years. And again, we've kept very good care, took very good care of our schools, but they still are showing their age. This is a slide that shows you where do the 16 elementary school district boundaries divide our 16 elementary schools. And so I want to kind of draw your attention to the central part of the city. In pink, you see Franklin, and then you see Huntley in the kind of light tan, and Edison, Columbus, Lincoln, Jefferson, Richmond, and Foster just across the river. Those are schools that were built in the 50s primarily. And so then what happened as a district is we started to grow out a little bit. So as we grew out in this direction to the northwest, we built Highlands in the late 60s. As we grew to the southeast side of town, we built Johnston and McKinley. Then all through the 70s, like I said, we didn't build a school into the 80s. And as our population started to grow in this area on the north side of town, between 00 and 41, and then over 41 a little bit, we built Houdini and we built Ferber. And on the southeast side of town, where we had growth along the 441 corridor, we built Horizon and Berry in the late 80s and the early 90s. And so now what has happened for our district is, again, we haven't built an elementary school in over 30 years, but we're seeing significant growth up here in the northeast part of our district, north of Highway 41. And currently what we do is all of the students that live up here in elementary school, they get bused down here to Huntley. And Huntley is currently over capacity by well over 100 students. Not only is it currently over capacity, but every area that's shaded in blue that you see is current housing that is being built or is projected to be built in the next several years. And so when we look at our district boundaries, we see that there's a little bit of growth potential in Ferber area. There's a little bit more in the Houdini, and all 3 of these areas in the Houdini enrollment area, they are being built currently. A little bit in Badger. No growth potential in the central part of our city, but then some growth potential on the south side where Berry and McKinley have students. I want to bring you back to the northeast quadrant here, and this is where we're currently having the most extreme overcrowding, and it's where we're going to have the most extreme growth in the next several years. So that's one of the pieces that we have, and I'll share this in a future video, why we're looking at building an elementary school on the very northeast part of our district. That's what I wanted to share with you today. So in the next video, I'm going to talk more about what a referendum actually is, and more specifically, why are we asking our community to support a referendum. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.